put probiotics back in and to sort of reseed the health of the gut. And when we decimated all of the good bacteria in my gut, it started triggering these anxiety attacks because the probiotics job, one of the jobs of the probiotics inside the gut is to help us make our neurotransmitters. So when we eat really horrible diets that are full of processed foods and they don't have any good fiber and they don't have any fermented foods in them and they don't have the nutrients that we need to make our neurotransmitters, we can't. And so we don't have peace and we don't have calm and we don't have joy because we're not making those things inside of our digestive tract. That's where 60 to 70% of our neurotransmitters are made.
Awe Genge, this is Mental Matters, hosted by Asego Toto.
Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of Mental Matters. I'm your host, Asego Toto, and before we dive into today's incredible conversation, I have a small favor to ask. If you enjoy what you hear today, please take a moment to rate and review our podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. Your feedback not only helps us improve, but also helps others discover the valuable insights we share every week. And if you find today's episode particularly inspiring or insightful, don't forget to share it with your friends, family, or anyone you think could benefit from it. Thank you for your support. It truly means the world to us. Now, let's get back into our conversation.
I would like to say thank you so much for being here and being able to talk about the conversation that the funny thing is that the last two interviews that I just did, it focuses on nutrition as a whole in terms of how they interlink with mental health. And through our conversation, hopefully, we'll get a different perspective and how it actually interlinks. And yeah, with those words, I would like to say thank you so much for being here and I welcome you to Mental Matters.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to talk about this topic. It's really a big heart passion of mine.
Actually, I'm more into mental health, and I just found out that there's a strong interlink between those two things, mental health and nutrition. So in terms of, your bio speaks about depression and anxiety. How does this experience shape your understanding and approach to mental health in terms of depression and anxiety?
Yeah, it actually fundamentally changed the way I approach mental health. I had absolutely no idea what was wrong with me when everything went sideways. I know there's a family history of depression and anxiety and just mental health struggles. And so I was aware that it might come up. But after I had my first daughter, I had all of these problems. I just started developing these anxiety attacks that wouldn't go away. They were lasting for more than an hour at a time. I was having multiple anxiety attacks in a day. And I went to the doctors and I did all the things that I was supposed to do. It took me a long time to decide to go and get help because I was really concerned that they were going to sort of put me inpatient psych and maybe take my kids away from me or do some of those other things. I was very worried because I thought maybe they would think I wasn't competent as a mom. I did the treatments. I went on the medication that they asked me to take. I was on serotonin medication and I was on benzodiazepines trying to stop the anxiety, but it didn't go away and it was just getting worse. And a dear friend reached out to me after a lot of prayer. Actually, we were just kind of at a loss. And so we asked God, what do we do next? And a friend reached out and said, I think, you've been trying this route for so long. Why don't you go and seek help from a naturopath? So I went and talked to the naturopath and she said, let's have a look at your neurotransmitters and what they're doing. And so that was the beginning point. I had nobody in all that time of trying to get treatment and help. Nobody had said, let's have a look and see what your neurotransmitters are actually doing. My serotonin was just fine, but my dopamine pathways were not working properly. And so we started supplementing with amino acid therapy then, which I think we'll get to talk about. But that made a huge difference. And then it was just a little bit later for another health concern that I had that a chiropractor suggested that I go gluten-free. And when I did that, my anxiety attacks stopped in 1 week. And that was not the intention or the goal. I had stomachache. I wanted to make the stomachache go away. And instead, all of these anxiety attacks just stopped. And I'd had them for 7 years. And then I started thinking, oh my goodness, if that one little thing made that much difference, what else am I missing? And that's when I started pursuing going back to school and looking at mental health from a holistic perspective and what's going on in our entire body and how it affects the brain, especially the gut-brain connection. So just trying to get this holistic perspective. And that's what led me into this work and changed the way that I think about mental health.
It's a fascinating way to actually discover in terms of actually it takes also on my side. And I had a very traumatic event happen to me. And so at some point that I didn't know what I was feeling, what was this type of feeling. And I thought it was something that would go away. As years went, I realized that I keep on having this feeling. I keep on having these thoughts, and whereas it ended up having suicidal ideation. It became so worse in a way of I tried by any means to seek help, but where I come from is a community that doesn't talk about mental health, doesn't actually acknowledge mental health. So I feel like it's one of the reasons why I started the podcast. As more I started doing this podcast, the more I realized that I was missing a lot of when it comes to mental health, when it comes actually ways of finding healing, and realize that as much as I'm feeling this way, there are people that are feeling more. And for the fact that I'm not alone in terms of actually feeling the way that I'm feeling. In terms of nutrition and mental health, as I mentioned, diet is very important. And it's something that I feel like people don't actually know what diet should do. What is a diet? Some people out there, and apparently speaking to statistics that I know when it comes to US, is the fact that there's a lot of obesity that's going on. And I read a paper this past weekend, whereas it was research on nutrition and mental health, how these two things interlink and what are the main benefits. And the thing that I realized is the fact that as much as you could eat healthy, but it turns that it doesn't have, if you eating healthy, you having those in terms of eating that carbohydrates, eating that rich nutrient vegetables. It doesn't help when it comes to obesity. So it gave me, I was in a point of realizing that if nutrition doesn't help when it comes to obese people, that means that fitness does. In terms of how to you discover the connection between your diet and mental health. Because as I've said, that it's something that is quite important.
Yeah, so a lot of it was to do with that connection when I went gluten-free and figured out that I was struggling so much with those anxiety attacks. And I thought that they were related to hormonal imbalance after the birth of my first child, because that's what I thought the trigger point was. And when somebody comes into my office and we have a conversation, we're always asking, can you finish this sentence for me? I haven't felt the same since. So we're looking for these key points that changed their trajectory, where they were going with their health. And for me, it was, I haven't felt the same since I had my daughter. And what the naturopath, what she explained to me was, I had an E. coli infection after she was born. And they gave me 7 bags of antibiotics over the course of 3 days. And that probably saved my life. And no doubt that it did, but it was a long time ago. And we didn't know then that when you clear somebody's gut with antibiotics, it's really important to put probiotics back in and to sort of reseed the health of the gut. And when we decimated all of the good bacteria in my gut, it started triggering these anxiety attacks because the probiotics job, one of the jobs of the probiotics inside the gut, is to help us make our neurotransmitters. So when we eat really horrible diets that are full of processed foods and they don't have any good fiber and they don't have any fermented foods in them and they don't have the nutrients that we need to make our neurotransmitters, we can't. And so we don't have peace and we don't have calm and we don't have joy because we're not making those things inside of our digestive tract. That's where 60 to 70% of our neurotransmitters are made. So if your gut's not healthy, then your brain's not healthy. And the biggest aha moment was at that point when I took out the gluten. That was when I was struggling with suicidal ideation. I did know that I wanted to go to sleep and not wake up tomorrow because tomorrow was too difficult to deal with. That was probably the biggest aha moment for me.
And something that I realized through me researching about this, whereas I came across, I think there are 3 types of diet, which is mind diet and also, let me make this thing. Actually, I had to write these things down and realize that how can one be affected with these nutrients? Actually, it's mind diet and it's the Mediterranean diet and
yes,
ketogenic diet.
Yes.
So one thing that I realized, speaking about being gluten-free, removing in terms of the dairy, my diet involves broad dairy products and potatoes. And one thing that I realized about myself this year is something that I didn't know that I had actually a problem on my gut when it comes to milk. I was someone that actually used to enjoy milk. This year, I realized that, whenever I consume milk, I always go rush to the toilet every single time. So I had an interview with a guest, and I told her this, and she said that I should try a gluten-free milk. And I tried it, and I saw the change. And it's something that we don't look at it. And so actually, I'm going to ask you the same question that I asked my previous podcast, is that how do you make sure that you provide information? How do you make sure that you, in terms of you direct your client to the relevant sources when it comes to the information around that health?
So just to clarify, you're asking me, how do I determine which direction to point my clients in when I'm helping them with it? Yeah.
Awareness, yeah.
Yeah. So I love that people are talking about things like the mind diet and the ketogenic diet and even the Mediterranean diet. They're all great starting points, right? But for some people, and this is just the process that I go through, I have a long intake process with my clients. So when you come and see me, we spend 90 minutes talking about your past health history. We talk about the things that you already think are triggers for problems that you're experiencing. If I have somebody who comes into my office and says, every time I drink milk or every time I eat cheese, then within 20 minutes, I'm in the bathroom, then we already understand that they probably don't have all the enzymes they need to break down those foods and they've got some gut involvement going on. But I do lab testing with my clients as well. So we look for their delayed food sensitivity test. There are blood tests you can do that look at about 190 different foods. It makes it very quick and very easy. In about 2 weeks, we have all the results we need. And then we can look at that and we can tailor the diet to the specific individual. So that, like, the mind diet is very good for the brain, and it's used by a lot of practitioners as an overarching starting point for protecting the brain. It's full of good protein and good fiber and good carbohydrates, right? And not too many carbohydrates so that the blood sugar stays balanced. But what happens if I've got somebody in my office and they're struggling every time they eat beans? It's supposed to be a wonderful food for you, but every time they eat beans, they are miserable and their tummy bloats up and they're uncomfortable and they go to the bathroom too much or it makes them constipated. That's not an ideal thing, right? If you keep eating that, it tells me there's underlying issues going on with your gut that we need to sort out so that you can eat that healthy diet. So we're peeling back the layers and then starting them out on a diet that's specific to them. It's got the broad basics of eating healthy, but then we're tailoring it to their specific needs based on a health history when they come in and the symptoms they're experiencing.